Welcome back, everyone. Grab your popcorn because today's story is packed with shocking twists, emotional moments, and secrets that change everything. Let's jump right in. The recent broadcast of General Hospital on June 18th has left audiences reeling as it masterfully laid the groundwork for what promises to be one of the most compelling and psychologically complex character evolutions in recent daytime television history. Throughout the gripping hour, the narrative spotlight was intensely focused on Charlotte, who spent the vast majority of her screen time engaging in behaviors and making declarations that would undoubtedly send shivers of profound anxiety down the spines of her family members. She is not merely experiencing the standard, albeit painful, grieving process over the latest monumental sacrifice made by her father, Valentin. At the onset of the episode, the meticulously crafted scenes featuring Charlotte presented the facade of a typical, emotionally overwhelmed teenager desperately struggling to keep her head above water amidst a relentless tide of recent familial traumas. However, as the narrative intricately unfolded and the episode marched toward its climactic final moments, her actions and words ceased to resemble the erratic flailing of a distressed youth and began to look chillingly like a calculated, deliberate blueprint for rebellion. She explicitly refused to heed well-intentioned advice, stubbornly insisted on navigating her treacherous reality strictly on her own terms, and almost instantaneously found herself willingly sucked into the gravitational pull of someone else's dire crisis. This behavioral paradigm is not a mere coincidence. It is a meticulously established modus operandi that her father, Valentin Cassadine, would recognize with a profound and heartbreaking sense of familiarity. The dynamic tension in the room was palpable as Danny, portrayed with an earnest and grounding sincerity by Asher Antonizin, valiantly attempted to offer Charlotte, played with razor-sharp intensity by Bluesy Burke, a desperately needed lifeline of optimism. Danny approached the delicate situation with the logic and hopefulness of someone who still believes that the universe fundamentally bends toward justice, meticulously pointing out that successfully thwarting the machinations of Cullum, played by Andrew Hawkes, could ultimately be the key to securing Valentin's exoneration and freedom. He offered her a tangible path out of the darkness, a strategic maneuver that could restore her family unit. However, Charlotte processed this offering of hope not as a comforting balm, but rather as an irritating nuisance, effectively treating his heartfelt encouragement with the same dismissive contempt one might reserve for unwanted digital spam. She has already firmly, and perhaps fatalistically, decided within the unyielding confines of her own mind that her father is destined to return to the cold, unforgiving reality of a prison cell. Because she has accepted this bleak outcome as an absolute inevitability, she possesses absolutely zero interest in entertaining alternative theories, optimistic projections, or hypothetical scenarios where her father emerges victorious. This brand of obstinate certainty, this rigid refusal to even entertain the possibility of a positive resolution, stands in stark, glaring contrast to the enduring legacy of hope and relentless perseverance that has long characterized the family line of her mother, Lulu, portrayed by Alexa Havens. The Spencer family has always been defined by their willingness to fight until the bitter end, to cling to hope when all seems lost, and to trust in the power of truth and justice. Charlotte, however, is actively turning her back on that luminous legacy, choosing instead to steep herself in the shadows of inevitability. This profound ideological divergence from the Spencer family's traditional optimism did not simply manifest out of thin air. It is the direct, undeniable result of years of intense first-hand observation. Charlotte has spent the formative years of her childhood and adolescence possessing a front-row ticket to the spectacular, often destructive theater of Valentin Cassadine's life choices. She has watched time and time again as Valentin meticulously entertained objectively terrible ideas, mentally gymnastics his way into deciding that these catastrophic courses of action were absolutely necessary, and then ruthlessly executed his plans simply because the safety or well-being of someone he deeply loved was hanging in the balance. Charlotte has not merely been a passive bystander to this chaotic cycle. She has been intimately intertwined with it. She has fiercely defended him against his myriad detractors. She has shielded him from the harsh judgments of Port Charles society, and she has remained steadfastly by his side, even when the rest of her extended family has thrown their hands up in sheer exasperation and sounded blaring alarms of warning. She has absorbed his justifications, internalized his methods, and learned that in the Cassadine worldview, the ends, specifically the protection of one's inner circle, always justify the increasingly dark and dangerous means. It is a twisted education in loyalty, one that has fundamentally rewired her understanding of right and wrong, replacing societal ethics with a fiercely tribal sense of devotion. As the June 18th episode hurtled toward its conclusion, the simmering tension within Charlotte finally boiled over into a definitive, chilling declaration of independence that essentially served as the launch of a dangerous new personal mission. Staring down Danny with a gaze devoid of childish innocence and brimming with a hardened, cynical resolve, she explicitly stated that she was absolutely finished following the rules and adhering to the expectations dictated by others. She verbalized a complete rejection of the guardrails that society and her family have attempted to place around her. This bold, defiant proclamation resonates with a deeply unsettling familiarity for longtime viewers. It sounds exactly like the kind of ominous, foreshadowing statement that a member of the Cassadine family typically utters a mere 5 minutes before orchestrating a catastrophic event that creates a massively compounded problem for everyone unfortunate enough to be caught in their blast radius. It was a moment of profound transformation. And then, as if the universe itself was responding to her dark manifesto, the phone rang, instantly providing the perfect catalyst for her newly declared state of rebellion. The shrill ring of the telephone shattered the heavy atmosphere of the room, and Charlotte eagerly snatched up the device, her eyes lighting up with the desperate, lingering hope that the unknown number flashing on the screen belonged to Valentin, reaching out from the shadows. However, the voice on the other end of the line did not belong to her embattled father. Instead, it was the frantic, desperate voice of Rocco, portrayed with palpable anxiety by Finn Carr, calling from the remote and sun-drenched location of the British Virgin Islands. This was not a casual, familial check-in or a breezy conversation about tropical weather. Rocco was reaching out across the globe because he was drowning in a terrifying situation and fundamentally needed immediate, tangible help. The bombshell revelation dropped during this frantic communication was that Britt, played by the deeply missed Kelly Thibault, is currently suffering from a severe illness, and her medical condition is rapidly and alarmingly deteriorating. The sheer desperation vibrating through Rocco's voice painted a vivid picture of a young man entirely out of his depth, watching someone he cares for slip away in a foreign land. He did not call the authorities. He did not call the hospital. He called Charlotte, intuitively recognizing that she possesses the same relentless, rule-breaking drive that might be required to navigate an impossible crisis. The tragic irony woven throughout this entire narrative arc is thick enough to cut with a knife. For years, Valentin has dedicated an enormous amount of his energy, resources, and manipulative cunning to the singular goal of protecting Charlotte from the darkness that resides within his own soul. He desperately wanted her to be better than him, to embrace the lighter, more heroic qualities of her Spencer heritage, and to avoid the treacherous pitfalls that come with bearing the Cassadine name. He built fortresses of lies and orchestrated elaborate schemes, all in the name of preserving her innocence. However, the events of Thursday's episode strongly suggest, with a heartbreaking sense of finality, that Valentin's lifelong battle to save his daughter from himself has already been decisively lost. The very traits he tried to suppress, the unyielding loyalty, the fierce defiance in the face of authority, and the reckless willingness to throw herself into the line of fire for a loved one, are now the very engines driving her forward. She possesses her father's unshakable loyalty, her father's absolute defiance, and her father's terrifying willingness to charge blindly into danger. And now she has a brother pleading for her assistance from halfway across the planet. When you combine a newly liberated, rule-breaking Cassadine heir with a desperate, high-stakes medical emergency in an international location, you are looking at a potent recipe for an absolute, unmitigated disaster in the weeks to come. The transformation is complete, and the consequences will undoubtedly be monumental.